is Terry Bradshaw, quarterback, Pittsburgh Steelers.
It's 7:15. There's a new home run champion of all time, and it's Henry Aaron.
This is baseball, Major League Baseball. And this is
ABC's Monday Night Baseball, live from Fenway Park in Boston, Massachusetts.
Looking. He's under the gun. He's tied. He throws. It is.
Welcome to another edition of the Past Our Prime podcast with your hosts, Bill Mahoney, Mark Hoffman, and myself, Scott Johnston. I'm coming to you from Cape Cod. My boys are back home in LA. How you guys doing tonight?
Great. You got our names right. I'm excited.
No, maybe it's something about not being in the same room together. Maybe he seems to know it's better by
possible. The fact that we're not in the same room and therefore I'm reading a script.
That's right.
And
makes it much easier that way.
I'm right there. I got the names right in front of me. Can't mess it up. So today
we're going somewhere.
We're looking back 50 years ago, as we do each week through old issues of Sports Illustrated. Today, I want to say one of the more underappreciated superstars of the game growing up, and that's St. Louis Cardinals great Lou Brock on the cover as he was racing towards history in the summer of '74, back when stealing a base was not as easy as it is to do as it is nowadays. Now with the bases and only being able to throw over twice, you throw over to first once, man, and a good base stealer, he is gone on your next move. So it's interesting. I always wonder, what would Lou Brock and Ricky Henderson and Vince Coleman, what kind of bases would those guys be putting up right now?
They probably have 140 steals by the All-Star break.
Exactly.
Yeah, they would have a lot. That's for sure.
It's fun again.
Hey, before we get to the scorecard, Mark, you got an ad for us?
We sure do, and it's in honor of us losing that legend, Willie Mays. He's got a great ad here for he's still hitting the long ball because he has those pro socks from Interwoven. And he's sitting on the golf course, and he's showcasing those socks. Say, hey, Willie, you're looking good.
I'll never forget Willie Mays coming into our office once at KCAL, and we had these huge posters. They weren't even really posters. They were big pictures. And it was of our anchors' favorite players. So Gary Cruz's favorite player was Willie Mays. And so the thing was 6 by 8 feet of Willie Mays. And Willie comes in and we do the interview with him and whatever. And he's just looking at this picture. And he looks at me and he says, "Can I have this?"
Oh, wow.
And I'm 22 years old. I'm like, I guess so. And I don't know if he was kidding or not, but yeah, was
it there the next day?
It never left. So he must not have wanted it too bad. I remember a week later, I told Gary, I said, "Did you hear him when he asked for that?" And he's like, "No, you should have given it to him." And I'm like, giving away the furniture in the office. That's not my call to make.
Wow. Scott, did you ever run into him in the years you covered the Giants?
He was there pretty frequently, in the early 2000s. Him and Willie McCovey, they would just kind of sit in the dugout. And it was kind of like Marlon Brando in The Godfather. People would come and kiss the ring because they were just Giants legends, and they would sit there. That was also back when Barry was around. So it was just a strange setup back in Scottsdale back in those days. So I said hi to him a couple times, but he had no time to leave. So
I love the story where I think it was his first year up with the Giants, and he was struggling so bad. And he thought he just was ready to give up. He thought this game wasn't for me. And I can't remember if they sent him back down to the minors for a little bit, or if they just said, no, you'll work it out. And then obviously the rest is history.
That's wow.
Yeah, because he
I didn't know he struggled.
Oh, he got like a hit in his first game and then went like 0 for 36. I mean,
oh my God.
I mean, really struggled, you know?
Wow.
And he was young. He was like 19 or 20. And I think you're right.
Yeah, you have to have patience. You know, people forget that. And I told the story before that Max Scherzer got sent down to the minors shortly after he was traded with the Tigers. And then he was only down there for about 4 starts, and then he was lights out once he came back up.
Hey, I got an ad for you. So
yeah,
it was for a board game, a sports board game called Pay Dirt. And here's the pitch. All right. So it says you're up against the quick, smart Dallas front four. 2 minutes to go in the game. You trail 17-16, but have a drive going down to their 44. It's 3rd and 8. A field goal could win it, but your kicker is erratic from outside the 40. What's the call? A trap up the middle for better field position, an end sweep, a medium pass, but what if they come with the blitz? They could nail you for a big loss, and it's goodbye field goal. Maybe a screen or a short pass would do, or maybe now's the time to gamble for everything and throw the bomb. It's Pay Dirt. Only one thing is certain. Now's the time to get a hold of the all-new Sports Illustrated Pro Football game, Pay Dirt. Set up the situation and find out. I lived for this kind of thing. Now, I remember.
Yes, I did too.
I got this game, but I never played it. I remember I was probably like 8 years old, and I remember like reading the directions, and it was like reading Latin. I had no idea what was going on.
Which is probably why it didn't work.
Yeah, maybe so.
I mean, it was going up against Stratomatic, which was the king of,
Okay, so then I was going to say, around 12 or 13, I got Stratomatic, and I loved Stratomatic. Did you guys play Strat?
I had Stratomatic baseball and football.
Oh,
okay. I had the 1969 NFL Stratomatic where the Steelers sucked, but they had a wide receiver, Roy Jefferson, who was unbelievable. And I liked it, but the baseball was the best. My cousin and I, we actually made schedules out, and we tried to play like a league with Stratomatic baseball.
Oh, yeah.
People have no idea. When you love sports, that's exactly what you do. You make out schedules to play a game.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
keep their stats and then the next thing you're playing Stratomatic and for some reason you have the Pittsburgh Pirates and you just fall in love with Mike Easler because he's just raking for you or something, and so I played Stratomatic baseball and basketball probably from like early 80s to about mid 80s, 4 or 5 years. And then around 2005 or 6, I got so this is like 35 years later, 25 years later, I got the Stratomatic computer version. 1 year, it was the year, it would have been 2003 because it was the year after the A's won 20 in a row. It was that team. Oh man, that was great. I played that. I wore that disc out somewhere. So
for people that have never played Stratomatic or even know about Stratomatic, it was like these little cards, and you put them on this thing, and then you'd spin this thing, and depending where the needle ended up, that's what happened on the play. So a really good power hitter, homer was 1, it'd be at the top, and it'd be pretty wide. But if it was like a pitcher, like the one would be so tiny, you could never hit it.
Right.
Think of a wheel like a Wheel of Fortune, kind of, but for sports.
And then it graduated to dice. It turned to a dice. They got rid of the spinning wheel. They turned it to a dice game. And then, of course, now, there are some people I see online that still play the dice game, but a lot of it now is computer generated. So anyway, I spent a lot of time. I didn't have time for girls because I was so into Stratomatic.
You just needed a girl that played Stratomatic.
Yeah, but the cover of the game is the Redskins against the Cowboys, but they can't show the logos. So they're like the stars wiped out, the Redskin logo's not wiped out.
Just the color.
Yeah.
The colors of the teams.
Yeah.
Yep.
Scorecard, Billy, go first.
Okay. Now we've all heard of, bugs getting in the way, but this one, there was a softball game. The Gateway
Softball.
Major. I don't know anything about softball. I bet you, I can't say his name knows that now. But Bruce Office Supply was leading the Canadian Forces Base Falcons 9-0 after 4 innings. Darkness descended. Here come the lights. Uh-oh. Right after that, swarms of mosquitoes and shadflies rose from the shallow waters and began to gather. They gathered around the lights, then the players, then the coaches, then the spectators, and the umpire came in, stinging everybody. Everyone's trying to get rid of them, slapping. They were unable to get signals of any kind. Finally, the ump looked up. All the fans had been gone for a while, so they called the game and gave it to Bruce Office. I know we've heard bees because there was something earlier this year with the Dodgers that they had a bee thing in Arizona. I've never heard mosquitoes coming in and stinging everybody or doing their thing and the crowd leaving and then having to cancel the game.
No. I mean, in the South, you would think that would have happened. Like, that's just a part of going to a game in, the deep South.
Well, here's what they said happened is that they said the evening went to the insects, obviously, and the blame went to the resources ministry, which had abandoned spraying the lake this year that they came from because they said it was ecologically unsound.
Mm.
So that's always good. Put a baseball game out there with a whole bunch of bugs and go, we're not spraying this year. No chance. No chance.
Well, I'm going to go from insects to frogs or toads, to be exact. The Australians were having another trouble with toads that had escaped from the home of a Darwin biology teacher 2 weeks ago. Now, a cane toad is 8 inches long, and get this, they eat cigarette butts, which is okay, ping pong balls, which isn't, and they squirt a powerful poison that can kill dogs, cats, and pigs, which is bad. And they lay 20,000 eggs a year.
Oh my God.
Of the 13...
Sounds like the perfect pet.
Yes.
Yes.
Of the 13 toads that get away, 8 have been found, and the remaining 5 are being tracked through the Darwin suburbs by a team of wildlife officials who play tape recordings of toad mating calls.
God, I wish we had that mating call to see what it sounds like. Those toads are now in Florida and Texas.
Is that right?
Yeah, the cane toads came out there, Florida and Texas now.
Oh, wow.
So I thought, are they out here?
That's not good. But then
no. Now, did you guys ever do? Is it true that if you? I was always, maybe it was a kid telling me that if you touched a frog, it gave you warts.
Yeah, I heard that. Not true.
Okay. I never knew that. I always, maybe it was my sister.
I like the love game. So in West Virginia, 11-year-old Bunny Taylor pitched a no-hitter against an all-boys team, and Bunny's mom said that I think some of the boys on the team had a crush on her, especially the catcher.
The catcher,
you could see her when grinning when she starts to pitch. She'd grin at him and he'd grin at her. And afterwards said, he just tickles me to death.
A love connection with the battery. That's nice.
There you go. I liked Freddie Patek.
Yeah, go ahead.
The Freddie Patek one. So Freddie Patek was a shortstop for the Kansas City Royals. He was only 5'4", tiny little guy. So they asked him, how does it feel to be the smallest player in the major leagues? He says, it feels a hell of a lot better than being the smallest player in the minor leagues.
So true. I loved Freddie Patek growing up.
Yeah.
When he came to the Angels, he had 3 home runs against the Red Sox in 1980. No one would ever have thunk he could hit 3 home runs in a game.
No. I mean, this was a guy who I think hit like 5 home runs a season.
Yeah.
So for him to hit,
it was a stolen base guy, but yeah,
he was like a leadoff guy for the Royals.
Yeah, for his career, which lasted into parts of 14 seasons, 5,530 at bats. He hit 41 home runs. In 1980 with the Angels, he hit 5. 3 of them in one game. I mean, that is.
I know some pitchers that had more homers.
It's one thing if you go to a game in 1980 and Don Baylor hits 3 home runs or something like that. But there's just no way in a million years you could think Freddie Patek is going to hit 3 home runs. I mean, put it this way: he hit He hit 1 home run in 1979. He hit 2 in 1978, 1 in 1976. We're talking 400 plus at bats these seasons. That's just amazing, you know.
Yeah, Dick Drago gave up 2 of the home runs. I kept thinking, did you not learn how to pitch to him the second time he came to bat?
I mean, you got to think though, if you're the pitcher, that you're just like, look, what are the odds that I'm just going to groove it again, and hope that he does what he always does, which is, I mean, maybe he gets a single or something, but
yeah.
I remember Dick Drago, but like that sounds like a villain's name in a movie.
It does, doesn't it? Mark,
Yeah.
Sounds like something to be in a movie, like a
He
Bond.
works for Dick Drago.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure, which is kind of funny because when we were doing all the Hank Aaron stuff, the pitcher that's escaping my memory right now, who gave up the 715th home run?
Al Downing.
Al
Downing, right.
Al Downing.
When Downing gave that up, he said, "Oh, I don't think people will remember me. They'll remember the guy who gives up his last home run," which is not the case. Unless you're me, they remember that as Al Downing. But I'm pretty sure, looking that up, if Dick Drago was who gave up Hank Aaron's final career home run, number 755. So he gave up couple to Freddie Patek and that last one to the hammer.
So was Dick Drago's last home run by
Hank Aaron?
His last home run off Dick Drago? Did it really?
Yeah.
Damn, I didn't realize. Wow, that's a great stat. I was hearing that, but I didn't believe it. That's wow. Yeah, Dick Drago pitched for the Angels too. So wow.
I think it was versus the Angels that Henry had it. The Angels were on the receiving end of a lot of bad stuff back then.
Yes.
All right, let's talk Gary Player. Gary Player's Expo, the 1974 British Open, held at Royal Lytham and St. Anne's Golf Club in England. Player shoots a 2-under to win his 3rd Open, winning in 3 different decades: 1959, 1968, and 1974. It's his 8th major. He would win a 9th in 1978 when he won his 3rd Masters. Really one of the all-time great players. For the longest time, I think back then, it was Palmer, Nicklaus, and Player. And he was always 3rd. And probably looking back, he's still probably 3rd of those guys. But he was
he won more majors. He won more majors than Palmer.
I know he did. Yeah.
What's interesting is he won 9 majors, but 1974 was the only year he won 2 majors in a single year, and that was the Masters and the British Open.
Which is amazing, because you think of like these guys. Now, look, I'm not saying Scotty Scheffler is not going to be one of the all-time greats. He may be. But like when you get hot like this, you think that you're just going to bunch these majors up in a few years. But for Player, he was just, I mean, think of that. His first one was in 59, or at least his first Open was. And his last one was 1978. That's one every other year for 20 years. That's pretty amazing.
And then if you just put Player up and then you look at Nicklaus, I kept looking at 9 majors is damn awesome.
Right.
Nicklaus won 18. 18.
18. He doubled them.
18. I mean, sometimes when I look at that, because Gary Player to me seems a bit underrated in terms of his greatness, but then you just think, man, Nicklaus won 18, man.
Gary shoots rounds of 69, 68, 75, and 70 for a 282. Like I said, 2-under. He says his mental game is beyond a reproach. I've never been as well prepared. I can't believe anyone else is as ready for this as I am, or wants it as badly. The only other person who might have been was Player's caddy, a guy by the name of Alfred Dyer, who was known as Rabbit. He was the first black caddy in the British Open. Rabbit said one day, "My man complains a lot. I just stick some paper in my ears and say, 'Don't give me no jive, baby.' And I make him laugh, loosen him up." Rabbit occasionally caddies for Player in the States, but never abroad. Gary Player said he's the best caddy I've ever had. He knows distances, and he knows me. Now, you guys have to remember, and Mark, you brought this up when we talked about Gary Player winning the Masters. Gary Player is from South Africa.
Right.
And early in his life, he was a supporter of apartheid in the government. Now, he he later would say that, that he would denounce it, and he would say that, we were, as a nation, we were brainwashed, and the government basically tricked us into thinking this was an okay thing. So kind of a interesting transformation, if you will. And I think the fact that he had a black caddy for 20 years, and they obviously had a deep affection for each other, shows that that player did make that transformation. But just kind of interesting that here's this South African, supporter of apartheid, at one point in his career, who later in his life has this guy named Rabbit, who died in 2019. They were together. He caddied for Player for 20 years. Player said of Dyer, "I'll miss Rabbit dearly. He caddied for me for over 20 years, and we traveled the world together. Like me, he had such a great sense of humor, and in this sense, he always reminded me of Muhammad Ali, and that he was always ready to laugh, crack a joke, or give a hilarious one-liner. Tons of charisma. During our time together, we were able to put his son through Princeton University, which I know made him immensely proud as a father. I'll miss him so much, and hope that when we meet again in heaven, he'll be there with a laugh and a smile, and then go out and for our first round there together." So I just think that's one of those great stories. That's great. He won all these tournaments, but really what you want to see in a human being is how they progress over a lifetime. And if this guy can support a racist government as a young man and see the error of his ways, and by the time he's an older man, be like, no. That's how you get change, right? You get change by changing people's minds. And so I think that's a really neat story.
I didn't know, mind you, I didn't follow a lot of that as a kid. I learned I hated apartheid from Lethal Weapon 2.
Oh, that was the theme.
It's the Krugerrand one, man. Yeah, because they tried to kill Murtaugh. Come on,
Right?
man.
That's not right.
Yeah, so that's where I learned that. I hate apartheid. I hate apartheid. Did you guys in that article read about the Dale Hayes?
Yeah.
He played the Phantom round?
Yeah.
He wasn't supposed to be, because they said him and Hayes, Nicholas spent, he lost a ball, so Hayes and Jack Nicklaus went looking for it.
Right.
And they couldn't find it, so they strolled down the fairway and dropped a provisional. But then Nicholas found the ball. Hayes picked the one up he had dropped and went to play the first ball. In that instant, he violated a well-known rule of golf, which I don't know. Once you drop a provisional, that ball is in play.
Right. So he was basically disqualified.
Yes.
Moment on, which was either Thursday or Friday, but no one said it to him. So he's still playing. Could you imagine if he had won or something like that?
I know. And then they go, dude, you were disqualified on Saturday. Yeah, because the Hayes got a 4-stroke penalty. 2 for playing the wrong ball, 1 for touching his ball, and then the other one, 4th stroke for being dumb.
That's wrong on so many counts.
It is. I'm sorry. Just, sometimes you read these articles and I just look for those interesting little tidbits thinking, damn.
Judged in the world and found wanting on the final day at San Juan was the U.S., which was zapped by a surprise Soviet weapon by our good friend Curry Kirkpatrick. This is about the amateur basketball finals back when, people forget, this generation forgets, not to have a, get off my lawn moment, but, everybody's professional now. But 50 years ago, amateur basketball was a big deal. The college kids, basically. And so even at that point, for the most part, we dominated, we being USA. And coming off the heels of that horrifically controversial 1972 Olympics, when when the U.S. lost to the USSR.
Just so you know, they actually ended the game. They did the final play where the Russians were down 1, and they threw a length of the court pass. So it was a turnover, game over. And then all of a sudden, they all get together and go, "Oh, no, wait a second. The clock didn't start," or something like that. They made them replay it.
Right.
Which was so wrong. And then they basically had a Hail Mary.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, and they won at the buzzer, and the USA team 52 years later in a protest, none of those players have still ever taken their silver medal.
Right.
Wow, I did not know that.
They feel
But
like
but again, those years it was our college players taking on their professional players.
Yeah,
right, right, and we still
and that was when it was the USSR as well.
right. So in this is a perfect example. So this Alexander Salnikov scores 38 points for the USSR, shocking Team USA 105-94. He went on to be on the USSR Olympic teams in both 76 and 80, and he's Ukrainian. He's not Russian, which goes to show you, I mean, he wouldn't be on the Russian team now, that's for sure. But, the USSR was humongous. It had so many countries that are now individual countries that back then were part of the Soviet bloc. So the U.S. squad was led by Maryland star John Lucas and Indiana star Quinn Buckner, just 2 years after losing to the Soviet. And, that's basically why we started letting our professionals play, is because we started to see that our amateurs couldn't beat their professional guys. And, we wanted now, as it turns out, our professional guys aren't necessarily beating their professional guys. We're still probably the best. And if we put our absolute best, we probably would. But basketball, and that's to the credit of the United States growing the game, is now such an international sport that there is, Argentina and Spain and these other countries can field formidable opponents. So ball that glitters may be gold. Drawing big crowds to its opening games, the World Football League could be a gilt-edged investment for owners and players. Basically, this was a long time coming. The WFL finally kicks things off. They don't have a lot of those stars that they had signed, the Zonkas and the Warfields and Kenny Stablers. Those guys had signed, but were going to play the following year. But they started off, the first game I want to believe was in Alabama between the Birmingham Americans and the Southern California Sun. 53,000 people attend the game, 55,000 in Philadelphia to see the Philadelphia Bell. Some of these names are just horrible, by the way.
It's great. The WF they had some wonderful names like the Florida Blazers, the New York Stars, the Charlotte Hornets.
Oh, is that
That's
right?
an interesting name for a professional team.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Chicago Fire, the Detroit Wheels.
That's a good name.
The Houston Texans. Maybe they could use that name now.
Yes.
For me, a sports team should always have their team end in an S. I don't like fire. I don't like revolution.
Yes.
I like Dodgers, Yankees, maybe, even the Red Sox, even though it ends in an X, sounds like it ends in an S.
The Southern California Sun, there's one without an S at the end because it's not Suns, it's Sun.
Yeah.
They had the weirdest looking uniform. You can kind of see it in the picture. There's they show the game with the Birmingham Americans running the football, and you can see the legs from one of the Southern California Sun players. But it's like magenta and orange and just weird color combinations.
The first nationally televised game saw the Jacksonville Sharks edge the New York Stars in front of 59,000 people, while in New York, 25% of the TVs were tuned into the game. So it's kind of funny that the WFL didn't make it, because here they have people coming for the most part. They've got stars coming to the league. They've got people watching on TV. But it just goes to show
it's the novelty.
Yeah, it's true.
I remember
would it have
the first week of the USFL.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
The national televised game was the LA Express hosting the New Jersey Generals, which was Donald Trump's team.
Right.
And that had I think 34,000 at the Coliseum for that game. But the novelty then wore off, and then it's harder to get the fans in.
And, the bottom line is you're not the NFL. You're always going to be compared to the NFL. And I think after a while, so they had all these fans, but the product wasn't as good. It was to the eye test. It was obvious it wasn't as good. Now they got lucky because the NFL's striking right at this point. So they had the football fans to themselves, but wasn't to be. The WFL is a blip on our radar.
They had guys that were on their way. In 1975, the Americans were about to add L.C. Greenwood, Ron Jesse, Jim Mitchell, and Mike Montgomery. And in 76, Ken Stabler was going to be there. So they were actually getting these NFL guys. They just couldn't hold on.
You probably, in order to make it work, and the closest one would probably be the ABA, is you got to have 5-6 seasons, and then the best outcome is to merge and get.
Well, that's what the WHA did with the NHL.
Right, exactly.
It said they were taking their guys, the Gordie Howes and the Bobby Hulls and guys like that, and the NHL thought, we can't compete if they're going to keep raising the salaries, so they merged them.
Yeah,
they got the best deal of them all.
Yeah,
obviously ABA merged as well.
The orange clockwork stops. Favored Holland versus the host country West Germany in the finals of the World Cup. We talked about this earlier on a cast. The World Cup was in West Germany, Hamburg. Back then, it was a split country.
Right.
East Germany and West Germany. East Germany actually beat West Germany in their when they played in the World Cup this year, 1-0. But there's a point system, in West Germany advanced while East Germany didn't. Dutch superstar Johan Billy, how do you pronounce his last name? Cruyff?
Johan Cruyff.
He scored early in the match of the finals on a penalty kick, but West Germany ties it on a penalty kick of their own, and then scored the decider on a goal by Gerd Mueller, one of the greatest goal scorers in the history of soccer. And once again, these are these little, these little rabbit holes you go down. I'm like, Gerd Mueller, I've never heard of him. And it said, in the article, it said maybe his last game for Germany. So it made it sound like he had been something. So I looked him up, and sure enough, he scored 4 goals in that World Cup. He scored 10 4 years early in the 1970 Cup. His 14 goals in World Cup play were the most ever until Ronaldo passed him in 2006. So it's just this one little line of this guy Gerd Mueller, who passed away a couple years ago. I'd never heard of him, and here he was, one of the greatest international soccer players ever.
But also in that World Cup, Netherlands nearly tied it toward the end of the game. Cruyff had a beautiful shot that Breitner, who ended up scoring the first goal for Germany, headed out on an impossible angle that actually saved that game, because who knows what happened if they went to a shootout that.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the Orange. By the way, does anyone get the pun they use, the orange clockwork stops?
Orange, yes, Clockwork Orange.
For people that don't know, that was a movie in the a very controversial movie when it came out in the early 70s.
That was. You've seen it.
Yeah, if you've seen it, it's very controversial. Yes. Some people like it. Some people are a little appalled by it, but it has an interesting message. So anyone out there, if you get a chance, watch Clockwork Orange.
But on about that World Cup, I didn't realize how dominant Germany's been. I mean, they call them Germany now. They won the World Cup in 74, 90, and 2014, but they were in the finals in 82, 86, and 2002. And from 1966 to 1990, Germany went 2-5 in the World Cup finals. I mean, they were that's an amazing country in terms of soccer wise.
I know, which is so strange.
Netherlands only been back 2010
because we still are hung up on Brazil as being the nation when it comes to dominant soccer play, but really in the last 50 years, it's been Germany.
Yes.
So now to our cover story, a nice place to visit. And basically what that means is Lou Brock is on first base, but not for very long. He has his sights on Maury Will's stolen base record. Unless something drastic happens, he's going to shatter it. He has 56 steals at this point. 53 of them are steals of second. Just 3 are third base, which is kind of crazy because really what separated Rickey Henderson and and Vince Coleman and the steals, the guys in the 80s, was Ricky stole third all the time. I would say that 30% of Ricky's steals were third base.
But didn't they tell Lou Brock not to steal third?
Yes.
They sort of dissuaded him from doing that.
Yeah, because
he wanted to, but
back in the day, the thought was, and it still is you're in scoring position at second base, especially with your kind of speed. So there's no reason for you to steal third, except for that once you're on third, an out, a wild pitch, something else can bring you home. But yeah, they basically told Lou, don't steal third base.
You know what's amazing about Lou is during a 9-year period, he won the stolen base title 8 times. Only in 1970, between 1966 and 74, that 9-year period, he won it 8 times.
Yeah.
And he had 12 straight years where he stole 50 or more bases. Obviously, in 74, he breaks Maury Wools's record with 118, only to be broken by Ricky Henderson years later.
That seemed unbeatable when he did that.
It did, yeah.
But here's something you guys might not know. Do you know? Let me ask you this: did Lou Brock ever hit 20 or more homers in a season?
I don't.
I would say no.
No.
In 1967, he actually had 21 homers.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah.
So he had the ability, he had power, he just probably was interested more in the contact and getting on base.
I like that one thing that Lou Brock talked about the distance between first and second is 90 feet.
Yeah.
But he said what it really is 13 steps.
Yeah.
I wish I could get out there. It's 13 steps to Brock. I wonder how many steps it'd be for us.
For me, it's 53.
That's right. I'm like 41. I'm thinking 13 steps. That's moving, man.
There's an O.J. Simpson video when he was with the Bills, and he had these really long strides where he could cover 5 yards in 2 steps.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's just, I don't know. I have to look at the video of Lou stealing a base. Was it short, quick steps, or was it long, like an elk long,
Yeah.
He was such a student of the game that he said the most important thing about base stealing is not the stealing of the base, but disturbing the pitcher's concentration. If I can do that, then the hitter will get a better pitch to swing at, and I will get a better chance to steal. He doesn't look to coaches for signs. I don't have time for that. I'm involved with my own strategy. I run the bases the way I hit. I try to tap in on the pitcher's thinking to be aware of how he is setting up the hitter. And so if I know that, he's ahead in the count, maybe now a curveball's coming, that's when he picks his spot to run. So he was a math major in college. And I have to think that a lot of that time he was like playing those math equations, trying to figure out, okay, I think this is my spot to go. And it was also kind of weird. He had 118 steals that year. The most ever he had after that was 74. So this was truly like the year that he just started running like crazy.
He stole 118 and 74, but the next 2 years he combined to steal 112. So 56 is good each year, but it wasn't, it takes a lot out of a guy.
Well, we talked
about Lou Brock went in feet first. A lot of this base stealers. Didn't Ricky Henderson go in first?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
It was more dangerous. But the pictures in this article show him stealing bases against the Cubs, which is the team that had Brock at the beginning of his career and the worst trade ever, the 1954 trade.
Did you go over that? Did you look at that, Mark, that Ernie Broglio won 7 games over 2.5 years? Bobby Shantz won no games. And then Doug Clemens hit 6 home runs and 36 RBI in less than a year in Chicago. How terrible of a deal. I mean, boy, that could be the worst ever.
Jim Kaat pitched in the big leagues from 1959 to 1983. So in those 25 years, he overlapped with thousands of players, one of them being our cover guy, Lou Brock. In fact, in 1980, Jim signed with the Cardinals 1 year after Brock hung up his cleats. But the two Hall of Famers did face each other a handful of times, and Lou in 13 at-bats against Jim, 6 hits. Not a big data point, but enough for Jim to know how good Brock was, and vice versa. And Jim Kaat and his 283 career wins joins us now on the Past Our Prime podcast. And Jim, I'm guessing it never gets old being introduced as Hall of Famer Jim Kaat, does it?
No, it's only been a couple of years, but it's sure worth the long wait. So yeah, it's a humbling honor to be included in the guy you just mentioned, Lou Brock, and so many others. Yeah, it's been a great 2 years.
Well deserved. Well deserved. You know, you pitched, as I mentioned, in the big leagues for 25 years, faced some of the all-time greats. When we talk about the great ones, seems to me that Lou Brock often gets overlooked. Do you agree with that? And if so, why would that be the case?
Well, I think maybe by baseball fans in general, nationwide, maybe he would get overlooked. But I think as a part of those great Cardinal teams, you know, the one thing that probably kept a lot of the Cardinals from getting the attention that they maybe deserved if they were on another team, because they had so many great players. You know, you had Gibby there, and then for a while you had Cepeda, and then Joe Torre won an MVP. And Kurt Flood was a great center fielder. Maris had a successful year there. So Lou was one of many, but I don't think as a player. I guess the only what I always appreciated is Lou told me that he never tried to steal second base off me. He couldn't get I think he got on first base enough, but he couldn't get a jump. I had what they call the slide step, almost a quick pitch motion. So it made it more difficult for guys to steal on. So that was a great compliment that Lou didn't try to steal second base. But what did you say? He was 6 for 13?
Yes.
Yeah, that'll lead most leagues.
Yeah, unless you're talking slow pitch softball, that's not so bad. It's not so bad. You know, as a pitcher, what is it like to have a speedster like Brock on first base? He said his job wasn't necessarily to steal a base, but to take away a pitcher's concentration. I'm guessing if he's successful at that, then he's partially won the battle already before he even thinks about stealing second.
Well, I had an advantage in that I was left-handed, so I was always looking at the runner. You know, in my early years in the American League, the only guy we worried about early on was Louis Aparicio. Mm. And, of course, Campaneris came along, and Finley had this designated runner, Herb Washington, then more speed there. But then in the National League, you had a lot of them, you know, Joe Morgan, Maury Wills. But I think with the slide step motion I used, and the fact that I was looking at the runner, that gave me a big advantage.
So much is made of Lou Brock's speed, but what kind of a hitter was he? Because he was a pest. He was a really good hitter as well.
Well, Lou was, you know, unlike today's hitters, which are, you know, they're all geared to swing as hard as they can and see if they can launch it out of the ballpark. But Lou was a guy that even off left-handers could use the entire field. And those were always the toughest guys to pitch to, because, you know, if you ran the ball inside of them, they could usually get a piece of it and foul it off. And then anything out over the plate, they took the other way. So Lou was one of those kinds of hitters. You know, Joe Morgan was a bit like that, but I think Morgan maybe showed a little bit power. I think Lou might have been a bit like my teammate Rod Carew. If they needed him to turn into a home run hitter, Rodney could have done that, and I think Lou probably a little more power than he needed. But his job was to get singles, get on base, steal second base, and be there for like the Joe Torres and Cepedas and guys coming up behind him to knock them in.
Now, when you signed, you went to St. Louis the year after, I believe, Brock retired. Did you ever get a chance? I'm sure he came around. Did you ever get a chance to talk to him and get to know him as a person, not just as a guy you faced on the field?
Oh, yeah. I crossed paths with Lou several times at, you know, different alumni functions, you know, and in particularly St. Louis was such a great organization of bringing their players back for different functions. So, you know, they celebrated our 82 team, and Lou was there for that. So I did get a chance to cross paths with him a few times.
And Jim, what was he like?
Well, to me, I mean, just the brief times I crossed paths with him, he was a very personable guy. And of course, knowing my friend Tim McCarver, who was one of my closest friends in baseball, he always spoke highly of Lou. So, I found him a very pleasant, humble guy.
My memories of you, Jim, is I started following baseball in the late 60s. And I just remember you as a pitcher, the art of pitching very quickly. There would be so many games I'd watch you pitch that would be over like in an hour and 40 minutes. Is that a lost art today, the way the game is played?
Yeah, I think it is. I mean, a lot of it is TV breaks, but out of desperation, when the Twins let me go, Johnny Sane convinced me that I had to get a little faster arm action. So we kept on working on it until it was really an extremely unusual motion, and it was very effective for a few years. And so we would play games as soon as I got the ball back. I got my sign very quickly. Sometimes we'd start the game, and I would tell Brian Downing, "Don't even give me any signs first time through the batting order. If I want to throw a breaking ball, I'll wipe my glove down my uniform." So we didn't have much time between pitches, and as a result, they still call me from San Diego on the anniversary of Randy Jones and I hooking up out there in an hour 31. Because he was a quick worker and a guy, neither one of us struck out a lot of hitters. So I think now, they are playing games because of the pitch clock in a faster pace, but it's different because they're more intent, they being the pitchers, on getting swings and misses. And we wanted contact. The hitters weren't as big and strong, and there weren't as many home run potentials in a lineup years ago, whereas now everybody swings so hard. So, pitchers are looking to get swing and miss stuff. One of my favorite games I pitched in 65 was I think it was an 8-hit shutout, and I had no strikeouts, 16 groundouts. So that was kind of the kind of game we wanted. Whereas today they would prefer, all you read about is how many guys they struck out. And that's going to drive up the number of pitches they throw, and it's also going to take a little more time.
I'm looking at your, Jim, you started pitching in the big leagues in 1959, and you pitched for 4 decades. I mean, into 1983. What was the difference between baseball when you came in and when you left, when you retired?
Well, I think I mentioned we were talking about Lou Brock. Speed was much more of a factor, and then the National League for years had those AstroTurf fields, so you had to be more concerned with speed. And with the AstroTurf fields, early on, most hitters were pull hitters. They wanted, particularly in Fenway Park, they wanted to pull the ball against that wall. So, as a left-hand pitcher, you wanted to pitch down and away, get as many ground outs as you could. But then when AstroTurf came along, particularly in the National League, then I was the benefactor of that, playing with a guy like Willie McGee in 82, because they could pound it off that turf and they'd get a single, turn it into a double. So I think that was a big factor, the speed and just the general athleticism of the athletes. Like in all sports, they just started getting a little bigger, a little faster, stronger, more athletic. So that was the big difference. I think we went to the designated hitter. They tinkered with the strike zone a bit. So I think we benefited from pre-electronic umpires or umpires that were kind of graded by the 3-wire, the triangulation that they used to show us the strike zone and grade the umpires, whether they were calling the right pitches or not. Before that, we just knew which pitchers were pitcher-favored umpires and which were hitters. So as a result, somewhere near the outside corner, I think you got the benefit of a lot more pitches in my era. That was true, too, in the 1997 playoffs with the Braves and the Marlins. When Eric Gregg was behind the plate in one game, Levon Hernandez was the star that year. And I mean, the plate was about 23 inches wide in that series instead of the normal 17. They were given the outside corner a lot. As electronics came in, the strike zone got a lot stingier, particularly from the letters on down. Now it's difficult to get a strike called on a pitch above the belt. And in my early days as a kid listening to the games on radio, you would hear the announcer say, and there's a strike at the letters.
Right.
Well, when's the last time you saw a strike called at the letters? It's been a while. So the strike zone was a big difference as well.
When we think of colleges that produce major leaguers, we think, maybe the Pac-12 or the SEC. Hope College in Michigan, not exactly a hotbed of major league talent where you attended. When did you get in your head that you might be able to become a professional baseball player?
Well, I went to a small college in Michigan. It'd be a D3 school now, Hope College in Holland. And of course, in those days, the scouts, there were scouts roaming the small towns all over the country. I mean, thank goodness for scouts. Nowadays they get rid of them all. They all do it digitally. So there was a man named Dick Winsick who lived in Kalamazoo, Michigan, and he was actually going to the game I pitched against Kalamazoo College to look at the pitcher for the other team. He didn't know anything about me. And I had a good game. So he said, well, I got to go back and watch that kid again. So the next week, we played 7-inning doubleheaders. We played for six weeks. I pitched 6 games. That was my college career. And so he saw me 3 times, and then he called, said, I'd like to have you come down to Chicago. The senator, he was scout for the Washington Senators, which a lot of the younger fans wouldn't know that's who we were before we became the Minnesota Twins. And so I went down to Chicago to try out with the Senators. And Cookie Lavagetto said, kid, you sign with our team, you'll be on my staff 2 years. So that got me pretty excited. But anyway, that's kind of how I got discovered. And then I did sign with the Senators and start my career in their rookie ball league.
And then I'm looking at one of your first few years, you got to face, toward the end of his career, you got to face Ted Williams. What was that like?
That was, before cable TV and before we saw so many of the young kids now see so many of these players in all their sports. They see them on TV every day. Ted Williams to me was just a legend, and I saw him on a trading card. So, the first time I faced him, I remember turning around and looking at my second baseman, John Shivey, and I kind of mouthed out to him. I said, I'm facing Ted Williams. Can you believe that? And of course, it was quite an honor for me to get to know Ted. I spoke at the opening of the Ted Williams tunnel because I was one of the few guys around in the 90s that had actually pitched to him in 1959 and I think one at bat 60.
In 1968, it was the year of the pitcher, and because pitchers dominated so much, they lowered the mound, tried to balance the game for the hitters. Was that an adjustment for you, or because you weren't a power pitcher, it wasn't as much of an adjustment for those type of pitchers?
Yeah, it was an adjustment. I did appreciate him. My younger days, I wasn't what you'd call a blazing fastball pitcher, but I did, I think, got a couple hundred strikeouts, maybe 2 years or so. So, yeah, I liked that angle because I was more of an over-the-top. My arm was over the top, more like an overhand pitcher. And when they lowered the mound, it really favored the sinker ball pitchers. Those guys that threw about 3/4 arm. And, of course, nowadays, they'd have to go through the Players Association to do something like that. But what they did back then is they said, well, we're going to lower the mound. And then, one year they said, we're not going to call the knee-high strike anymore. And they just did whatever they wanted to from those early days. And they still really haven't done anything to favor the pitcher. They do it to favor the hitter. If they had any interest in making the battle between the pitcher and the hitter even, And of course, the averages are so low today. It's not because the pitching is dominant. It's because the hitters are stupid. It's because all they want to do is hit the ball out of the ballpark instead of just make contact with the ball. So, now we used to use pine tar and everybody used it. But now Diaz just got suspended for 10 games. But I've told the commissioner this. The baseball, they need to come up with a baseball that has a tackiness to it where a pitcher can grip it properly. And if they don't, then they have to take body armor, batting gloves, pine tar away from the hitter to even the battle. And they won't do that, of course. So the game really needs that. But everything they done since I came up in the late 50s, there hasn't been anything that's really said we're going to give the pitcher a bit of a more advantage over the hitter. The only advantage they have now is like for 2 innings, there's a lot of that could throw triple digits and they get a lot of strikeouts, but management isn't really interested in the long-term health of those pitchers. It's just, can they get a couple guys out for a year or two, and when they can't, we'll come up with a replacement part. Whereas in my day, the organizations were looking at you more for long term.
Who was the toughest hitter you ever faced? Was there one batter that just, when you saw him in the lineup, you said, "Oh no"?
Well, it wasn't a guy that I fear. Frank Howard was quite a presence in the batter's
Yes.
box. Frank did some damage against me with some home runs, but Al Kaline consistently was the hitter that I had more difficulty with. He got more home runs off me than any other hitter. And he hit Brooks Robinson had almost as high an average. I faced Brooks more than any other hitter in the big leagues. And he faced me more than any other pitcher he'd ever seen. And he got more hits. But, most of them were singles. He may have had a home run or two in there, but Kaline got the hits and he also got the home runs.
And then I want to move around a little bit. And then we got to go back to 65. There you are. You're in the World Series. It's a great time to be playing Minnesota Twins. And you get to face 3 times or go against Sandy Koufax. You actually won, I think it was game 2 in that series. Tell me about that. Tell me what it was like facing off against Koufax, who pretty much was everyone's hero.
Well, in those days, the only game on TV was Saturday game of the week with Pee Wee Reese and Dizzy Dean. So we never really saw. I never saw Sandy Koufax pitch in person. I never saw him in spring training. I never really met him. And then in those days, they took pictures of the starting pitchers behind the batting cage about an hour and a half for the game. And when I shook my hands with them and they took our picture, my eyes started weeping. And I said, "What do you have on?" Well, he had this hot ointment on the back of his shoulder and his arm to kill the pain, because that was the start of the arthritic elbow that ended his career. But we went to the bullpen. Our bullpens were pretty close together. They were only maybe 20 feet apart. So, I could see him and hear him warm up. And I thought, wow, I've never seen the ball come out of a pitcher's hand like that. When the game started, I said to Johnny Sain, I think we each went through the batting order 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, except me. We each may have walked a batter. So it was still nothing after 3. And I said to Johnny Sain, if I give up a run, this game's over. I said, nobody's going to hit this guy. We scratched out a run, 2 runs. I think only one of them was earned. And then they took Sandy out for pinch hitter. Drysdale actually pinch hit for him. And then when he started game 5 and 7, we never got another run off. He shut us out in both games. But he was so far above any pitchers or hitters that ever faced in the American League. I kind of felt sorry for him, because it was just futile seeing him swing and miss. And in those days, they weren't necessarily trying to hit home runs; they're just trying to make contact. And the plus thing being, at my age and now the Hall of Fame, and several other baseball events, I've had the privilege of, becoming a good friend of Sandy. He went out of his way to come to my induction 2 years ago, which I was, very honored by. So it's nice to, at this stage of life, to be able to get to know those guys as people and to be their friends, as well as you were competitors years ago.
Jim, we mentioned that you pitched for 25 years in the majors. So obviously you were able to stay healthy for most of your career. But as you mentioned earlier, pitchers today are, replaceable. They might as well not have names, just numbers, because it seems like every other pitcher has arm trouble, and in particular, Tommy John surgery. Is it more prevalent now? And if so, do you have a theory as to why?
Well, yeah, the numbers, I follow the websites. I do a podcast of my own, and there was, some of the, like Scott Boras, the agent, was speaking out. Some of the baseball people are speaking out. The doctors saying, if we don't get our pitchers to stop throwing these horizontal break pitches with tight spin, they're going to continue to injure that elbow. I actually had the same injury that Tommy did, but I had it for my last start in '67. If we win that game, we win the pennant. And I had probably the best month of my pitching career going. And then I suffered what we later came to find out was that medial collateral ligament tear, but I had all winter to rest. So I started the next year, and I'd say for 3 years I pitched at about 80%, but we didn't have the surgery then. And now that the surgery has come along, and pitchers are trying to throw too hard, too young, and that's the answer to the second part of your question. That medial collateral ligament, the noted doctors like Dr. Andrews will say that really doesn't mature till you're about 27. So if you get kids now that are playing travel ball and are pitching too much, and all you read about is the radar reading, so you got a young kid. The first thing I hear now when I talk to a young player, I was playing golf with the son of one of my friends yesterday, 14 years old. He said, yeah, my friend down there, he's in the 9th grade. They got him in the high 80s already. So all the emphasis is on velocity. And baseball at the top level won't change, because they know if they can get guys up there, and they're using 6 pitchers a game. So if they can get a guy up there that can just throw hard one after the other and get hitters out, fine. In 2 years, he'll be gone. They'll get another one. I heard that the average length of career for a starting pitcher now is 2.5 years.
Wow.
So all the injuries. Say a guy like Lucas Giolito, who, he had a few good years, but now he breaks down, and but they do well enough early on to earn a lot of money, and they can retire. Of course, I don't know what they're going to do the rest of their life. They're 30 years old. They've earned all that money, but anyway, that's the way the system is, and general managers and managers are that's the way they're approaching pitching. We want you to develop a pitch that's swing and miss stuff, and we'll run you out there for an inning or two, and then we'll get 5 guys a game to do it. So it's one of the reasons why the game today doesn't appeal to me. I follow it, but I really don't enjoy watching it because you don't have the starting pitcher matchups like one of my favorite games on the broadcast was when Pedro Martinez faced Tim Lincecum. When they were both at the top of their game. Now, that was a real pitcher's duel. And we just don't see those anymore.
Yeah. When you're talking about Tommy John surgery, just a couple of weeks back, we had an opportunity to interview Mr. John, obviously, through the surgery is named after. And I also saw a really nice video you put together for him for being honored in Terre Haute about a week ago. Right. Why is Tommy John not in the Hall of Fame? And make a case for him.
Well, that's a good question, because when, TG and I were teammates, we've known each other for 60 years. Our message to each other was sort of, if you get in the Hall of Fame and I don't, I'd be disappointed. If I get in and you don't, you'd be disappointed, because our careers were so parallel. And I think what the committees in the past have missed is that they think of Tommy John was a pitcher that had surgery and was able to prolong his career, pitched for 26 years.
Mhm.
What they don't realize is that he had a better career after his surgery than he did before. And the very fact that his name is mentioned every day, and the fact that there are, he put his career on the line along with Dr. Joe to try that surgery in 1974. Had that not worked, his career probably wouldn't have. So I think a combination of all those things that I mentioned, he should have been in years ago. But I've even heard from some of the Veterans Committee members, I know it's supposed to be confidential, but there are guys that will say, well, we don't just put a guy in the Hall of Fame because he had surgery, they named surgery after him. I think they forget that he won 288 games. We were the same type of pitcher. He was a very effective pitcher for a long period of time. And I will be on the Veterans Committee. If I'm alive and well next year, I'll be on I think it might be this fall, on the Veterans Committee. And you can trust me that I will be making every point I can to prove to the others that Tommy John belongs in the Hall of Fame.
Wonderful. That would seem to right a long wrong. So we're in your corner on that one for sure. Jim, you win
Good.
16 Gold Gloves, second most ever behind Greg Maddux. In fact, I think you won them 16 straight seasons from 1962 to 77. But I have a strange question for you. Did you win them all with the same glove?
I think maybe all but one. I still have the glove. It's right upstairs here in my home. I'm going to donate it to the Hall of Fame. But yeah, I used the glove for 15 years. It's got friction tape over. It's got holes in the way. If you threw it on the street corner, a kid would throw it in the trash. You don't see any value in it. But yeah, it was the original Wilson A2000. And you break it in. It took a long time to break a glove in, and it just it was so comfortable that I just kept. We would get another glove every spring. Wilson would give us a couple of new gloves, and I would find some left-handers in the minor leagues, because in those days they had to buy their gloves. So I would give those gloves away. I just kept that same one year after year.
How hard was it to say goodbye to that glove, to finally say, buddy, you've done your job. It's time to go to bed?
Well, I never really said goodbye to it, because I was still using it when my career ended.
Really?
How
Yeah,
so?
it didn't come out till the mid to late '60s. The version I had. So then, as a starter, I used it all the time, and then as a reliever, I kept using it. I didn't have to use it as often, but yeah, I still used it. Those if you see some of the games, maybe some action shots of me pitching for the Cardinals, you'll see that old glove with black tape wrapped around the wristband. So I used it right to the end.
Hey, so after so many years in the American League, you and your glove are now traded to the National League. Obviously, you have the DH and stuff, but was that a really big adjustment for you or not?
Well, I think it was more of an adjustment for the hitters. I was new there, but one thing I liked when I first got over there in '76, the National League had the reputation, the umpires, of calling the low strike, because they used the inside chest protector. They wore it under their uniform. The American League umpires still had that balloon chest protector, and they stood straight up, so you didn't get the benefit of the low pitch. So that was an advantage. But probably what hurt me when the White Sox made the trade, and they had asked me ahead of time, I had 2 really good years there. Mr. Allen was losing money, and he wanted to get some young players. And so they said, if you could go to a team over there at the time, the Mets, the Pirates, and the Phillies were all looking for a veteran pitcher. Mickey Golich went to the Mets, Doc Medich went to the Pirates, and I went to the Phillies. And Chuck Tanner had told the Phillies general manager Paul Owens, now, you want to start this guy every 4 days, even every 3, because the more I pitched, the better my control was. I'd come off a year where I pitched 300 innings. But when I got to Philadelphia, Danny Ozark, the manager, was more of a, well, I don't like to start left-handers against lineups that are dominant by right-handers. So there was just a small period of time where I really got into a nice groove there. And I was beginning, I think I went from maybe, I would say I was 4-4, something like that. And all of a sudden I started stringing some wins together. And then Danny decided to use me to pinch run. Greg Luzinski, and I came around and slid into third base and cracked my kneecap. So that kind of ended my run as an effective starting pitcher. I didn't pitch much as a starter in 77 or 78, and then fortunately with the specialization of the game, I went to the Yankees and was kind of a lefty out of the bullpen, and was fortunate to do that in St. Louis for a few years, and I ended up being, getting a World Series ring because of it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, Jim. 1982, your second to last season in baseball. You're back with Lou Brock's Cardinals, and you finally get that elusive ring, and you do it in just a wonderful baseball city to boot. What was that like? That entire season?
Well, I kind of capped off my induction speech with a thank you to those 82 Cardinals because, as it turned out, I had the record. This is not a record of achievement. It's just trivia, but I had the record for the most years between World Series appearances, 65 to 82 at 17 years. And when I got my World Series ring, that was into my 24th full season. And that's the record for any player in any team sport to play before getting a championship ring. So you can imagine what an honor it was for me at age 43 to finally get that ring, particularly in my last season. And it was such a fun team to be a part of because young fans today would not understand how we were winning if they watched that Cardinal team when he had 67 home runs as a team. We stole 200 bases. We had an infield defense second to none with Ozzie at shortstop. And we really played baseball the way I learned to play baseball as a kid. Granted, we had AstroTurf, which helped with guys like Willie McGee, Lonnie Smith, and Ozzie Smith. We could run, we could field. We didn't have the power, the Phillies or the Expos. And then, of course, against Harvey's Wallbangers, the Brewers in the World Series, they had more home runs than any other team, and we had fewer. So that was cool to be a part of that team.
I love that team.
Now, if you look at baseball now, obviously it's all about hitting. I was one of those guys that I enjoyed pitchers hitting. I enjoyed the girls dig the long ball. You were quite a hitter, Jim. How much did you enjoy it? You had 16 home runs. You had more than 100 RBI. How much did you enjoy being a hitter? And how much do you think baseball nowadays took that away from the pitchers? Do you think they miss it?
Well, I think, in general, I think the modern fan, they wouldn't appreciate seeing a pitcher go up there and strike out, and so I think that's what, of course, the American League went to it because the National League began to become a more exciting league with all the black stars they had and the speed. And they wanted more excitement in the American League, more offense, so they went to the DH. But when I was a kid playing baseball, the goal was, I just happened to be a baseball player that just happened to be a pitcher. You learn to hit, you learn to bunt, you learn to field, you learn to run the bases, you learned everything that an everyday baseball player learns. Because a lot of us played like first base or center field when we weren't pitching, in our amateur days. And, nowadays, even Little League, they're probably using the DH. So I miss that because I always thought if I was a better hitter than the guy I was facing, it gave me an advantage. And like Johnny Sain had told me, before the DH, he said, if you can be responsible for one run a game, you drive in a run, you bunt a guy over, you move a guy over from second base, somehow you could say I was responsible for one run. The other team has to get two to be ahead of you. So it was a big advantage to go into a game with that kind of a goal to help your team score a run. Obviously, that doesn't exist anymore. It's kind of an embarrassment to the pitching profession because they wouldn't even know how to run the bases or how to slide.
So,
True.
so Jim, we do a segment here, a trivia segment called 50-50, where I'm going to give you a 50% chance to get a trivia question right. Here's the trivia question. So Lou Brock, who was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, wasn't just a baseball player, true or false? He also owned a flower shop and was a florist.
That's true.
You got it. Absolutely true.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, that's that was true. Yeah.
When you were in St. Louis, did you ever go to his flower shop?
I never did. Lou may have sold it by the time I got to St. Louis, but I remember it one time. Because in the early days, we all had to work in the off season. I was with Raleigh Fingers at a Hall of Fame function back when they honored the Negro Leagues. That was a couple of months ago, and we were talking about the different jobs we had to get in the off season. And Raleigh said, yeah, when he was on the victory parade for winning the World Series in '72, the next day he was stocking shelves at Sears for like $8 an hour or something. So that was what Lou did in the off season. He opened up a flower shop.
I remember on an old game show they had Y.A. Tittle on, and he identified himself as an insurance agent from Palo Alto, California, because that was his job during the off season.
Oh, that was Bob Feller as well. Bob Feller in the off season, and he built up a clientele where he would go around to all the other players and try to sell them insurance. And a lot of guys were car salesmen. Because you needed an off-season job back when the minimum salary was $6,000-7,000 a year.
I have a quick trivia question, by the way, for my two co-hosts. True or false? So you actually played baseball during 7 different presidential tenures. 7 presidents were in office while you were pitching baseball. Is that true or false, guys?
That's true. That's true.
Yeah,
true. You started with Dwight David Eisenhower and you ended with Ronald Reagan.
That's unbelievable.
If there's one little item of trivia I wish I had is that, before ceremonial first pitches, like when the season opened in Washington, the president threw out the first pitch. Now, I think Nixon was going to be the incoming. Or no, I think Kennedy would have been the incoming president, but Eisenhower was still the reigning president. So from his presidential box, we all got in a little circle, about 15, 20. Everybody didn't go out for it. And then he would lob the ball, and everybody had a scrum to dive for the ball. And I remember our bullpen coach, Clyde McCullough, he got the ball. And I thought, man, if I had a baseball now signed by Dwight D. Eisenhower or something, that probably could have been a pretty good collector's item.
That would have been great.
I think Nolan Ryan also pitched for 7 different under 7 different presidents. So in this interview alone, we've talked about Brooks Robinson and Al Kaline and Stan Musial and all the greats. And I mean, you must just pinch yourself, Jim, to think that you are in that conversation. You are a Hall of Famer, just like all these other wonderful storybook legends that we're talking about.
Oh, believe me, whenever I go to Cooperstown, and I'm only 2 hours and 20 minutes away here in Vermont, and every time I go there, I don't take for granted what an honor it is. And we tend to look at those past players with so much reverence, I think, before television and everything. When I took my orientation tour, they have you seated on a bench, and they have this big, almost takes up the whole wall, this big enlarged photograph like a mural, and it has Cobb and Ruth and Hannes Wagner and Christy Mathewson, and it's got all the original, probably the 8 most famous players of that era. So I had my picture taken on the bench. I still have a copy of it, or in my photo file. And the photographer, when I got out, or the tour leader, when I got up, said, "What did you think of that?" And I said, "My first thought was, what am I doing here? Because you just don't, it's hard with my love of baseball history to think that I'm in that same hall with guys like Ruth and Walter Johnson. Just as a quick aside here, in about 6 weeks in Minnesota, we're going to honor the 1924 Washington Senators.
Oh, wow.
The anniversary of their winning the series. And Walter Johnson's grandson is going to be there.
Oh my God.
And so I will be there as well. So it's going to be fun to kind of talk with him. I think his name is Hank, to find out, his memories of back in that era. And unfortunately, the kids today, with all the sports and everything they've got going on with video games, in my day, baseball was the only game.
Yeah.
So we really took it upon ourselves to learn the history, and it's so enjoyable when I got a chance to meet guys like Lefty Grove, and sitting on the porch of the Otis Saga with Robin Roberts and Spani and Ford and Feller, and those are precious days in my memories.
Often when people are asked how they are doing, I hear them say, "I'm just living the dream." And for Jim Kaat, when he says that, it's true. Thank you, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on and sharing your time with us. We really enjoyed it. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Jim.
All
You're
right,
the best, man.
guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, there's one of the more underappreciated greats from, like you guys said, 4 different decades, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, really spanned the time of when we started paying attention to baseball. Yeah. And, I think sometimes what happens is with these guys that play forever, they get accused of being compilers. But you go back and look at Jim Kaat's, he won 25 games one season. He won 208
games 3 times. Yeah.
19 complete games that year. I mean, he was a great pitcher in his time.
And I mean, we're covering baseball right now in 1974, and that to me was one of the golden ages of baseball. To have guys like Brock and Kaat, playing the game. It's something that I savor and really enjoy.
I always just like how these ball players, their recollection is absolutely amazing. When Jim Kaat was talking about the World Series, he was spot on. I think we gave up 1 run. Oh, it was 2, but one of them was, they know.
Right.
There's
one of the runs was unearned.
Yes. Most people would just go, I can barely remember what I did last week.
Right.
And he's pulling something from 50 years ago. Like, oh yeah, just amazing.
The thing I also took from it too is, when he finally quits in 83, he goes on and he becomes a pitching coach for the Reds for 1 season. And then he's like, but I'm going to become a broadcaster. And he goes on to become, a multiple Emmy-Award winning sports analyst for baseball. You can just tell, obviously, right? Baseball, like he said, he's known Tommy John for 60 years. He is what they call a baseball lifer, and you can tell he loves baseball. It just oozes out how much he loves the game of baseball.
But you can also tell that they're disappointed in the way baseball is nowadays. All they do is they just throw fastballs. They want you to throw really hard. He just seems to be that, like, not curmudgeon-y, just like, man, you sort of miss when a pitcher was actually a pitcher.
Well, and not just that, right? He's spot on. I remember, the 88 ALCS, and it was Dave Stewart versus Roger Clemens. It was like, oh, we got this pitching matchup, Or in 1985, Mike Scott versus Doc Gooden. And you don't have that now. Because these guys only go 5 or 6 innings for the most part. And once again, I'm not trying to be, a get off my lawn. That's the way the game is now, and I accept that. But you do lose something when you don't have, Greg Maddux going up against Randy Johnson with a lot on the line, That's how you sell the game.
Yeah.
And Kaat even mentioned he threw 300 innings in 1 year.
He did. 3 times.
How many pitchers throw 200 innings?
Jeez. Some of them throw 160, like Blake Snell, and get a huge deal. So, But remember, we in spring training, I remember being White Sox one year, and there'd be guy. I remember Aaron Wasserman was there, who came from, I believe, like a softball team, and he did the sort of
Softball?
underhanded sort of Disenberry. Exactly, that too. um, throw me off. But I remember a guy telling me, you always want pitchers that throw from different angles and different speeds because you want to be able to throw the other team off. It just seems like everybody now is,
It's
98,
timing.
there's no pitching. Yeah, exactly. Throw the timing off. There doesn't seem to be that anymore.
Well, like you said, he threw an 8-hit shutout, which would never happen now, right? The only time you get to throw a shutout now is if, like Gavin Stone the other day, 3-hitter, 103 pitches, but he didn't strike out anybody. That's just
He
that's
put the
unheard
ball
of.
in play.
Yeah,
Yeah, it is. Yeah, ball in play.
pitch to contact. You don't hear that anymore at all. So
You got 7 guys behind you that can field the ball.
Exactly.
I thought he was great. I really enjoyed it.
It was a lot of fun.
Right.
Yeah.
Perfect. All right, people. Bill and Mark have something, and so do I. So I'm going to go first. Catfish Hunter of the Oakland Athletics wants to make a commercial. Not any old commercial, says Catfish. A dog food endorsement back home in Hertford, North Carolina. I have 30 beagles, and 2 bird dogs, and I buy a ton of dry dog food for them every 7 weeks. I don't want any money for the commercial. I'll take it in dog food. So what happened, Billy?
Next year, he got one with the Purina high protein dog meal feed. So he put it out there and he got it.
Can you imagine? I mean,
yeah, he is. He should have had that.
I have 2 dogs. Billy, you have a dog. I don't think you have a dog, Mark.
I got a cat, not a dog.
Okay. But, so cat means you got to buy food. You got to buy litter, Could you imagine if you had 30? How much food that would be? That's crazy.
And I wonder if back in those days, like nowadays, they would have someone come over and take care of them. I wonder how much he took care of those dogs, because in those days, that's what they did.
Right.
You didn't hire someone, you just did it. The family did it.
Duffy Doherty, Billy, this was a great one.
That was. He was a former college football analyst and
coach Michigan State.
There you go. And the thing is, he just, he said the action in college football is so fast that sometimes you can't get in a story between plays. He said he was telling one about Bear Bryant dunking his head in a bucket of water. By the time I finished the story 3 plays later, Bear would have drowned. You've got to know, man. You got that time. You're right, because you want to get up there and just talk like we're doing now. You got to get in and out.
Walter Matthau, great actor, Bad News Bears. He could do comedy, he could do drama. He always wanted to call a horse race. And so he got a chance to, and he got to be an announcer at Santa Anita, but he kind of lost track of the field in his binoculars. And Jim Murray of the LA Times said, there are people in that crowd who still don't know who won the race. Matthau, years later, would do a horse racing movie called Casey's Shadow. So it was always like in his blood. I think he kind of liked to gamble. And Walter Matthau, if you've never seen the original movie The Odd Couple, with Jack Lemmon, the basis for all the television shows and stuff that Neil Simon played, there's a great scene because the Walter Matthau is the Jack Klugman character from the TV show. He's the slob, but he's a sports writer. And he's covering a Mets-Pirates game. And in the background, he's on the phone with Jack Lemmon, and he misses a triple play. As you can see behind him, like the Mets get out of the inning with this great triple play that he doesn't see.
Change the complex of their game. Giants manager Charlie Fox resigned, replaced by Wes Westrom. San Francisco is just a game and a half out of last place, a position annually held by the Padres. Attendance in 1973 for the Giants was 834,000, and this year it's worse. A week earlier, they drew 3,000 fans to Candlestick Park. Candlestick Park, if you guys ever went to that, was right on the bay, and a night game was like going to a football game in Green Bay in December. It was freezing. Mm-hmm. And
so you've done that before? You went there when it was that cold?
I did, yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can remember a couple times. My dad lived about 40 miles inland in a town called Walnut Creek. And, in the daytime in Walnut Creek, it'd be in the 90s. And so we would go over to the city and we'd leave like around 4 o'clock, and my dad would be packing up like blankets and a thermos full of coffee. And I remember thinking, are you crazy? What are you talking about? And he'd be like, you can't wear shorts, you gotta wear a windbreaker. So yeah, it was
It's the old Mark Twain line. The coldest winter I ever spent was a summer in San Francisco.
yeah.
I drove by the old Candlestick Park when I went to San Francisco a few years ago. Just in there's nothing left. There's a sign. It just seems sort of in a desolate, lonely area, having never been there when it was actually up. I just,
Yeah,
seems it was right on the water too.
it wasn't anything to write home about. I mean,
They didn't have those chain link fences out there too.
yeah, right. Chain link fences for the home runs, and really the Niners had their most success there, more so than the
Yes.
NOS was the best division in baseball. Even the Padres were playing well. San Diego takes 4 of 6 that week, but still could not earn any respect. Dan Spillner defeated the Mets 5-4 and appeared on TV afterward. The next day, a young fan called and said, "Hey, I saw you. You were pretty nervous." Spillner said, "Yes, but I did my best." The youngster said, "Just the same, you made a fool of yourself." You're doing a heck of a job with that, with your son there, parents. Way to go! He gets the attention of a major league pitcher and tells him what an idiot he looks like out there. Really nice, perfect. Oh my gosh,
That kid became a TV executive.
yeah,
Sort of
right?
on that note, do you remember, guys? You guys remember Hector Santiago?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I interviewed him when he was a rookie. And every question I asked, it was like one word, or he couldn't get his words out. And later on, right before we left, I interviewed him again. And before he started, he stopped and he goes, "I want to apologize for my first interview. I looked like an idiot." Very honest. He goes, "I just looked like an idiot. I couldn't speak. I didn't know what I was saying." I thought, wow. His hands were completely just covered in sweat. And I remember saying, "You were cool," but I'm just thinking, I guess in these days you just say, "Yeah, you made a fool of yourself."
Especially if you're a 14-year-old jerk. Yeah. Indians pitcher Gaylord Perry has his 15-game win streak come to an end, losing to Oakland. The Twins beat Cleveland in another game 2-1, with the winning run scoring on an 11th inning bunt single by Rod Carew, who's hitting .382. It's Carew's second bunt hit of the game and his 16th of the season. I got to imagine that that's about 14 more than all of Major League Baseball this year. The Angels ran their losing streak to 11 straight before the Angels gave owner Gene Autry a reason to make a congratulatory call to new manager Dick Williams, who had guided the team to 10 of those defeats. "I've waited 2 weeks for this call," said Williams after the Angels won for the first time 7-0. So some habits are hard to break, aren't they, Billy?
Yes, they are. And they're still doing it nowadays.
It's easier to get hurt than to the top. Motocross. Billy, this one was personal for you, huh?
It was. I grew up, but my stepfather loved dirt bike riding, loved it. So hence he loved Roger DeCoster, which is the big part of the article, along with I think it's Heikki Mikkola of Finland, but he loved him. And Roger DeCoster was, I knew about Roger DeCoster and Ivan Stewart, but DeCoster, every time he would turn it on, DeCoster would be winning another race. And then you realize how great he was that Cycle News named him Motocrosser of the Century in 2000. He was, and in 2010, he was named a legend for his motorcycle achievements. The man was amazing. I mean, I never saw him in person, but my stepfather just raved about him. And that's how I knew about Roger DeCoster. So when I saw this article, I thought, remember that guy.
I think that's one of the great things about sports in general is, here's something that doesn't appeal to me, but it appeals to someone. And,
as I mentioned several times on this podcast, my father-in-law raced motorcycles. So he was about 36 competitively.
Finally, the Louisiana Purchase. This is a big one. The Superdome in New Orleans was being built, would open in August of 1975, 4 months after it was supposed to open. I found it odd that the first example Sports Illustrated gives for the domed stadium was that there might be some fans who wish to sit in a frigid stadium in a blizzard and watch football, because just as uncomfortable is the scenario of watching a game in New Orleans where it would be 100 degrees and 90% humidity. And in fact, I've done both. I've sat in frigid temperatures watching football, and I've been in unbelievably hot, sweltering temperatures. And I'll take
What's worse?
The hot is much worse. You can put on a coat, you can move around, you can walk around if you have to. Especially now, you can put like foot and hand warmers. You can get something warm to drink. Also, if you're where I was in Denver and New England, but the Denver crowd, I mean, it was packed. So you get a lot of that body, body heat with the other fans. If it's 95 degrees and 90% humidity, there's nothing to do. You can't get naked. And even then, well, unless you're Mark,
Oh, yes, of course.
Mark's like, oh, it's hot. It's hot. I'm getting naked.
Take the clothes off.
And someone comes up and goes, it's only 75 degrees, sir.
That's hot to me. So they started construction in August of 71 on this thing, and it took them 4 years. But we went in great depth on one of our earlier podcasts when we had Larry Zonk on, and winning that Super Bowl over the Vikings. That game was supposed to have been played in the Superdome, but they didn't have the construction done, so they had to play it in Tulane Stadium, which was probably the worst stadium that a Super Bowl has ever been played at.
Yeah, it's the Saints' first home field. Yeah.
Buster Curtis, director of the stadium's architectural engineering team, said no one man could have conceived the planning of this building. We picked the best brains in the country, and then we used computers to build it. The Superdome Commission is in talks with the American League about an expansion baseball team. The Dome can hold 64,000 fans. They have an NBA team that draws well, and the Saints. The Saints have been a consistent team for the last 20 years. They were awfully bad when the Superdome finally opened up, and for the first 10 or 12 years, the Aints. Remember that? Remember the Aints?
Yeah, I remember the bags.
Oh yeah, the bags over their head.
Yep. And the stadium was nearly empty.
Right.
It was a terrible team.
They really
just terrible. I mean, they had Archie Manning. That's who I remember. Archie Manning, and then they had George Rogers.
Right.
So I remember those are the two guys I remember. Didn't they have
1 in 15,
right? Back there, Muncie or something? No,
Chuck Muncie. Was Chuck Muncie on that team? Yeah. They didn't have much.
They had individual guys, not a good team. And then Drew Brees got there and, took them to the promised land.
Yeah. I thought this was awesome. There's so much rain in New Orleans, and at 9.5 acres, that's how big the roof of the Superdome, 9.5 acres, that they had to have these special basins built in the eaves, because if they just let the water sit on the roof, and then if it got to be too much, it would flood the city. Because
oh my God.
It would finally all just start coming down, so just the things you have to think about being an architect. I would just be like, well, there's a roof. We don't need anything else.
And didn't in Hurricane Katrina, the Superdome was like a home for many people?
I mean, a hellish home, but yeah, that's.
Yeah. I mean,
They have 88 bathrooms, 40 hot dog stands, 10 elevators. Starship Superdome is a record breaker. A group of New Orleans physicians will operate a 9-bed clinic in the dome as a year-round practice. There's a bank, a jewelry store, a men's clothing shop, a wax museum, and a health spa. So it was kind of the first, because a lot of stadiums now are no longer just stadiums. There are restaurants, and it's like a little mini town to go to and go shopping and stuff. So it sounds like the Superdome was one of the first to incorporate that kind of stuff. And like I said, I don't hear a lot of talk about demolishing the Superdome, and 50 years is a long time for these stadiums to
for any stadium.
For any stadium, absolutely. For the record, let's start wrapping this thing up. Billy, you got something for us?
I just like that Fred Williamson, he was going to replace Don Meredith, but the Hammer had a little bit of trouble. He was used on a few preseason broadcasts, but from what I'm read, he dressed like Superfly. He had his jacket open, no shirt on underneath. He was playing Fred Williamson, but so he was declared unsuitable by ABC. He was relieved of his duties at the beginning of the regular season, becoming the first Monday Night Football personality to not endure for an entire season. But if you go past that, he does have 127 screen credits, so he's done all right for himself. And he also is in Dusk to
Dawn. Great role.
And the thing is, I met Fred Williamson in Palm Springs years ago. Man, he's a piece of work.
He's a character.
He's
a hammer, man.
Mark, he's exactly what you would think of from Dusk to Dawn. He's exactly that guy.
So
that guy.
The thing I want to know is, what did they think they were getting?
Exactly. Because that's who he was at that time. He was in a lot of those type movies.
Right.
So what did they think? To come out in a three-piece suit and go, let's tell you about what's going on in the field. No, you knew what you were getting. And I think nowadays he would have sold fantastically.
Oh, yeah.
He'd been great.
I mean, I just don't get, first of all, it is an odd pairing with Gifford and Cosell, who are pretty straight and narrow. But I'd love to see some tapes of those first games. That would be.
I looked for that too. I looked for that. I kept looking. Give me just one. Him speaking when they went to him in a preseason game. There's nothing out there that I found.
Who did they replace him with? Was it Alex Karras or who did?
It was Mark. It was Karras. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Think of that. He was normal.
Exactly.
We got a couple faces in the crowd, right? Mark, you got one?
Bob Hamilton from Maryland. He batted .567, .911 slugging percentage, 16 steals in 18 games. Star center fielder, was drafted by the Baltimore Orioles. But like 99% of players that get drafted, they don't have careers really. He played, I think, 3 years in the minors, and that was it.
Yep.
Especially baseball. It seems like it's better now, that they have a better track record now in baseball. But back then, it seemed like they were just kind of throwing darts.
But also the 29th round is the 29th round.
Right.
That's you have to jump through hoops. I remember a guy when I was teaching at bartending school, he got drafted by the Tigers in the 22nd or 27th round. And he told me, he goes, when you get drafted, he goes, you have to stand out each and every day. He goes, you don't get the coaching. You don't get the guys to come over and help you. He goes, the guys that get that are the ones that are drafted in the first couple rounds. He said, so if you don't stand out, he goes, you just sort of wash out. And that's what he did.
Yeah. I mean, they're putting their money where their bonuses are.
Yes.
Billy, you got one?
Yeah, James Robinson. He was a track star at Laney Community College. He eventually ran in the 1976 Summer Olympics. He didn't get a medal, but he ran in it. And he was also on the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, which we know boycotted the Summer Olympics. But it wasn't all bad. He did receive a Congressional Gold Medal because of the fact that they spurned those Olympics. So he got something out of it. Yeah, it's quite impressive. That face is in the crowd, man. These people do some amazing things. It's amazing how Sports Illustrated is able to find those kids that really turn out to be something really great in the sports field.
And then that's kind of like what we were talking about with the World Cup too, Billy, about, he makes the Olympic team in 76, and you just know that he's got one thing on his mind for the next 4 years, and that's 1980 Moscow. And I don't know, I think, Russia invaded Afghanistan in 79. And I got to think, a 23, 22-year-old guy is like, that's the furthest thing from his mind. Who cares? I'm concentrating on, and the next thing they're like, oh, well, we might be boycotting. And he's like, what? What are you talking about boycotting? And then, they do. And, the difference in an athlete's career from 1980 to 84, he doesn't make the team, and his dream is ripped from him,
And all that training, all those getting up at 4 a.m. and doing everything you have to do to go, well, sorry about that, you're done. Because basically, you're right. After that, he was done.
Finally, 19th hole. We talked a couple weeks ago with Mike Neal, who was one of the pioneers when it came to American cycling. What do you got for us, Billy?
Just a guy, Clark Champion, said bicycle racing is the most demanding American sport. Although it gets little to no recognition, cycling requires the tactics of chess, the stamina of marathon running, the daring of downhill skiing, and unqualified dedication. And as we all know, if you've ridden a bike, it can be fun when you're riding just around the town or down the street. But if you put in the work that Mike Neal and them were doing, it is a full-time beat-down job. Remember what he said about, those guys when they were up in Denver and they did those, cross-country skiing for 4 hours, lifting, it's just amazing what he had them do.
Yeah. And,
there's a movie, I'm trying to remember the movie, but it was about cycling, and they're showing these athletes and what they had to do, the testing, the cardiovascular shape they have to be in.
Yes.
It's mind-boggling.
It is. Like I said, I can ride, 15 miles now, but you're talking going up hills and you're going at a speed that's out of control. It's quite amazing what they can do. And they don't get along.
The other thing that we don't talk about is if you're a true cyclist, you can't help but be in traffic. At some point, you're going to have automobiles around you, and
yes, one way or another.
That is a bad combination and very dangerous for the cyclist. So they are taking their lives in their hands just to train, not even the races, but just to go and get that 20-mile ride in. Where can you ride 20 miles in this country unless you're, up in Big Bear? And even then, you're going to have cars around you. It's crazy.
And isn't that what Barry Bonds is now? I know Reggie Miller is. Barry Bonds is a big bicycler now.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he's really thin now. Yeah.
Oh, that's weird because cyclists are known not to use steroids.
No, they don't. Yeah. They don't blood dope either. So yeah, you don't have to worry about that.
None of that. None.
Hey,
that's going to do it for this week as we put a ribbon on the July 22nd, 1974 issue of Sports Illustrated with Lou Brock on the cover. I want to thank our guest, Hall of Fame pitcher Jim Kaat, for coming on the show. Can't ever get enough talking with these guys who you can just tell loved baseball the way we did, probably, even more. They loved it their entire life, from their early playing days until, well, in Jim's case, 41 years after his final season in the bigs. I got nothing else. You guys ready to say goodbye?
I'm ready to say goodbye.
All right. So until next time, for Bill, for Mark, I'm Scott. Thanks for listening. We are past our prime.